Hello, what we're going to be covering in this program is how you can go ahead and create a class using Python. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to write a class named person with data attributes for a person's name, address, and telephone number, and then we're going to write the appropriate property decorators and setters for the data attributes of the person class. After that, we're going to write a program that tests our person class. In that program, we're going to create an object of the person class. We're going to prompt the user to enter data for each of the person's data attributes. And then we're going to store the data in the object and then use the object's property decorators to retrieve the data and display it on the screen. So first thing we're going to talk about is what a property decorator is. So let me just go into PowerPoint presentation, and let me go ahead and open that up here. So in most languages, basically in order to access or go ahead and mutate a data attribute within the class, you create accessor or getter methods and mutator or setter methods. So an accessor method or getter method returns the value from a class's attribute without changing it, whereas the mutator method or setter method stores or changes the value of a data attribute. So one of the languages that does use the getters and setters is Java. And basically what I've done is I've created a program, a class called Celsius. It has one data attribute, temperature. And what we've defined within that class is a getter method that will go ahead and return the value of the temperature data attribute, and a setter method that will go ahead and update the value of the temperature data attribute. So that's typically what most object-oriented programming languages do, is they define getter and setter methods. What Python has introduced is a property decorator, and it's just the Pythonic way to use getters and setters in object-oriented programming. And what I've done is I've attached a link to a tutorial that talks about property decorators. So if you go to that link, there's a nice example that walks you through the differences between getters and setters and property decorators within Python. So that same Celsius class that I created above, instead of adding getter and setter methods to it, what I've done is I've created a property decorator right here. And what that property decorator, it takes the name of the attribute, which is our temperature, and it goes ahead and returns that value to whatever program calls it. And then I've created a temperature.setter, and basically what that does is you pass a value into this setter, and what the setter does is then it updates the value of our temperature data attribute. So this is a Pythonic way on which you can go ahead, instead of defining getters and setters within your class, you can go ahead and use property decorators and the dot setter to go ahead and get and set the values of your data attributes. And that's what we're going to be doing in this programming example. So let me just go ahead and escape out of this and close this out. So I've gone ahead and I've actually written the code for both the person class and the person tester class. So let me just open up the code for our person class. So basically what we have here is we've used the keyword class and then the name of a class, which is person in uppercase, and then a colon. So anything under the colon then is indented, and that's part of that person class. So the first thing you need to define is the init method. And basically when you create a person object, you would go ahead and pass in the name of that object, the address of that object, and the phone number of the object that you're going to be creating. And basically that gets passed in, and then what we do is we set the name data attribute for that specific object to the value of the name that gets passed in, the address of that specific object to the address that gets passed in, and the phone number of that specific object to the phone number that gets passed in. So this is what goes ahead and constructs and initializes an object when we create an object of the person class. So the next thing I've done on the following lines is I've defined our property decorators. So the first thing you need to do is specify an ampersand and then property. And then when you define your property decorators, they must be defined using the same name as your data attributes. So name, address, and phone number. And all we're doing when we go ahead and create these is we specify the self. And what we're doing is we're returning the name, the address, and the phone number when each one of these property decorators are called in a program that is creating a person object. So we have a property decorator for our name, we have one for our address, and we have one for our phone number, and all those property decorators do is return the applicable values for the name, address, and phone number data attributes of our person class. And then we've defined the setters down below. So we have ampersand name.setter. So basically what that does is when this setter is called, the user sets the name, passes in the value of the name, and then basically we go ahead and update the name attribute with the value that gets passed in. Same thing for the address of the specific object that the setter gets called on gets updated with the address that gets passed in. And finally, the same thing for the phone number. So when the phone number gets set, then what this phone number setter does is it updates the phone number for that specific object. So this is our person class. If we go ahead and run this module, just to make sure there's no compilers, nothing will actually happen. Basically, we're not creating any objects. We're not gathering trying to access any objects because we have not created them yet. So that's what we're going to be doing in our tester program. So if I run the module, if everything runs correctly, I should not see any compile errors, and at the command line, I should just see a command prompt. So looks like our person has been created successfully. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at our person tester class that we've created. So the first thing you need to do is you need to import the person.py file. So basically what you're doing on this first line is you're importing the .py file of where you've created the person class. So when I created my person class, it is actually in a file named person in lowercase .py. So whenever you import that, you need to import the name of the file, not the name of the class. So after we've imported the name of the file that our person class is contained in, I've gone ahead and I've initialized 3 local variables for the name, address, and phone number. On the next 3 lines, we're just prompting the user to enter the name, address, and phone number, and then we're saving them in the name, address, and phone number local variables that we've created up above. And on this next line here, this is where we actually call our init, or our constructor found in our person class. So what we're doing is we're defining a variable that we're going to store our person1 object in, and then we specify person, the name of the file, and then the name of the class that we want to go ahead and create, which is person, and then we're passing it in the name, address, and phone number that the user entered on these lines that I've highlighted. So once that information gets passed in and the initializer is called, then an instance named person1 of a person gets created. So now that instance is stored in memory. Once it's stored in memory, we can go ahead and access the values for each one of the data attributes of that person object that is stored in memory. So this is what we're doing on the following lines that I've gone ahead and highlighted. So we're displaying the person information. How you do that is you would go ahead and call each one of the property decorators that we created in our person class. So we would specify the name of our instance that we've created, which is person1, and then we would specify the name of our property decorator. So the first one is name, the second one is address, and the third one is phone number. So what this will do is it'll find the location of our person1 stored in memory, and it'll retrieve the name and display it. It will retrieve the address that is saved in that object, person1 in memory, and it will retrieve the phone number of that object that is saved in memory. So that's how you would go ahead and access the data attributes for the class that you've created using those property decorators. And then the next 3 lines, what we're doing is we're actually updating the address using our address setter that we created in our person class. So first thing we're doing on the first line is we're just prompting the user to enter address, and we're storing it in the new address variable. On the next line, then, we're calling our address setter by specifying the name of our object and then dot address, which is the name of our setter. And then we're going to go ahead and set that equal to the new address. So the new address gets passed into our setter, and then our address data attributes get in memory for person1 gets updated to the address that the user inputted on the previous line. And then what we're doing on the next line is we're just using our property decorator to access that new address to make sure that our setter works and we're able to update the address for that person. So what we're going to do is we're going to run this program. We should be prompted to enter the information, and then the information should be displayed for us. So let me just go ahead and click on Run Module. I'll just enter a name, John Doe, enter an address, and then enter a phone number, 867.5309, and then what we've done here now is we've created our object and we've used our property decorators to retrieve that information. So now we want to specify a new address. So I'm just going to go ahead and specify Main Street and hit enter. And we come back and it returns John Doe's new address is 100 Main Street. So it looks like our class and our tester program are working correctly. So this is just a brief video that shows you how you can go ahead and create a class using Python and using property decorators to access the data attributes and set the data attributes for a class in Python, and then how you would create a class to test that class that you've created. So that's all I had for this video. So we will go ahead and talk to you later.